ghost activity, fringe science, interdimensional beings, psychic phenomenon, and conspiracy theories. Does the truth exist? How close are we to finding it? Come listen and discover the answers yourself. Welcome to the Paranormal MD, where the out of the ordinary is discussed. Join your host Mary Marshall and her guest as they inform, discuss, and entertain you. Talk radio just got weirder, wiser, and more interesting. Now, here is your host of the Paranormal MD radio show, Mary Marshall.
Hello and welcome to the Paranormal MD. I'm Mary Marshall, your host. I would like to let you know that this show is sponsored in part by the Milwaukee Paranormal Conference that is taking place October 15th and 16th this year, 2016. Tickets are available. This conference is absolutely fantastic. There is a all-encompassing approach, meaning that there is ghost talk, UFO talk, alien talk, cryptozoology. There are just all kinds of fantastic speakers that are going to be at this event. And I have the good fortune of being one of them that will be speaking at this conference and also holding a workshop. So I encourage you to get your tickets today and come on out. Also, I'd like to tell you about my guest for this evening. His name is Sam Maranto. Sam Maranto is the Illinois State Director for MUFON. He is a certified field investigator who has handled many notable cases in his decades of experience. So we will be speaking to him a little bit later on in the broadcast. However, before we get to our guest this evening, we first need to... That's right, it's time for Weird World News. Since we don't have a lot of time this evening for Weird World News, I thought it would be fun if we did, rather than current news, did what happened on this day in history. So with that in mind, let me lead off with, on this day in 1932, near Bombay, Gandhi begins a hunger strike in protest of the British government's decision to separate India's electoral system. Also on this day in 1908, William Durant creates General Motors. Then we also have in 1832 on this day, Confederate General Lee is born. On this day in 1950, Soviet representatives condemn an essay writing contest sponsored by the United Nations. The incident, though small, indicated that the Cold War was as much a battle of words as a war of bombs and guns. On this day in 1845, there was a murder in Illinois. Phineas Wilcox is stabbed to death by fellow Mormons in Novo, Illinois, because he is believed to be a Christian spy. The murder of Wilcox reflected the serious and often violent conflict between the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the surrounding communities. On this day in 1620, the Mayflower departs England. The Mayflower sails from Plymouth, England, bound for the New World with 102 passengers. On this day in 1810, Mexican War of Independence begins. And on this day in 1993, Frasier, a spin-off of the long-running mega-hit sitcom Cheers, makes its debut on NBC. Well, that's the end of our what happened on this day in history news. I know, it's a little departure than the usual. I sort of felt like I was doing a classical station on this day presentation to you. Nonetheless, I hope you found it to be some fun facts. And with that, please stay tuned. We will be right back. Hello and welcome back. You are listening to the Paranormal MD radio show, and I'm your host, Mary Marshall. Our guest for this evening has joined us. His name is Sam Maranto. Sam is the Illinois State Director for MUFON. He is a certified field investigator who has handled many notable cases in his decades of experience. He is best known for his role as the lead investigator of the 2004 Tinley Park, Illinois mass sighting case, his work with the NARCAP on the O'Hare International Airport sighting of 2006, and the well-known Northlake car incident of 2008. His case studies have been used in numerous television programs, including 10 Best UFO Encounters, NBC Dateline, Invasion Illinois, Aliens at the Airport, and the History Channel's UFO Hunters. As always, Sam is an active lecturer and event organizer, and just an all-around good guy that I have the pleasure to call a friend. So without further ado, please help me welcome Sam Maranto. We were just talking a little bit off air, and it was just such a good conversation. I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. You were talking about the state of what paranormal is in relation to the separate fields. What did you come across that stirred up this line of thought for yourself?
Well, you look at the term paranormal, it's just two words, para and normal, something outside the scope of what would be considered normal. And looking all the way back to the origins of the term, it really breaks down, and then when you're looking at it today, it almost becomes an entirely different animal. It encompasses almost everything, where before it was something that would be out of the scope of conceivably normal, not even just as we know it to be normal, but conceive it to be normal. Now today, when you look at Wikipedia, which of course is the number one source of information, one of the first things you see in there is the belief that of extraterrestrials. And I find that almost hysterical because, of course, we aren't alone in this universe, and to think that is almost naive. And then the second thing is ufology. To think that unidentified aerial phenomena just don't exist, but that if you do think about it, you're believing in something that is just outside the scope of something that is natural or practical or possible, and that's absurd. And but yet, still in all, my thing is, in the world of the paranormal and ufology, is there something commonplace? And that's something that I think you and I are going to be able to address and hopefully cover that now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's been a journey and evolution of being an investigator of paranormal. Most of my focus for many, many years was on ghost haunting type activity and or psychic medium phenomenon. But I have, slowly over the last 5 years branched out, and even gone into, and there's all these the subcategories, because we seem to have a big division between the ghost and the UFO and the cryptozoologist and the psychic mediums. I'm always looking at what is the common thread, what's the root, how is this occurring type of thing. In order for me to do that, is to really delve into all these other fields, which, as we kind of know, I really want to get much, much more involved in MUFON, UFO type research. Let me ask you this. What is probably the most disturbing or most concerning, maybe that's a better word, or the trend that you are seeing with people in dealing with paranormal phenomenon, UFO type activity in particular?
I think the biggest problem today investigating is, of course, the insistence that if they have seen something, that they automatically have to conclude that it is something out of the ordinary, where in fact it just may be a misinterpretation, an exaggeration, extrapolation, or interpretation. The bottom line is not everything that seems to be unusual or our senses either perceive or preclude as being unusual or paranormal, that they are. And trying to convince people, no, the photograph you see here that you've taken is actually a refraction of light, not a UFO or
Right.
not a entity trying to stalk you. And that seems to be the biggest problem, is to curtail belief and to keep people objective, because the phenomena there is genuine phenomena. Unidentified aerial phenomena do exist. Call them UFOs or whatever. Some of them are more nebulous and bizarre than others, that appear to be obviously solid craft. Yes, there's some sort of apparitions that appear to be disembodied things, possibly, or is it just our or something else? Again, the common denominator is the human psyche and our ability to analyze what our sensorial perception is, and also the interpretation that's been thrown into our cultural mix and our psyche of the media and how we perceive things. We may not have anything close to a grip on all of this, or at least maybe the underlying toe, but where it all begins is with the human experience.
Do you find, I one thing I will say right away is I do find that people believe what they want to believe, no matter sometimes what you tell them, and that can be very frustrating, especially, when you're trying to look at the reports, I'm sure, of things. Isn't it, though, I think, a misunderstanding by a lot of people when they hear the term UFO, they immediately think it's alien.
Oh, absolutely. And UFO specifically means an unidentified flying object. The source, this is the thing. We're interested in find out the details of what is seen because much of what we do, if not everything we do, is reactive instead of proactive, and that really is a problem. Imagine if we were able to, much like many of these ghost hunts or being able to go to a location with instrumentation and actually sit there and observe and record the phenomena as it's actually taking place. Now, I'm not saying that's the perfect world either because it seems somebody's always interjecting this, that, or the other, and there's always possibilities of microwaves or whatever, as you know, all sorts of things causing problems. But I think there's enough genuine material being recorded to state that, yes, in some of these places, we definitely have phenomena taking place. We have to work in the reactive. We have to work in almost a forensic capacity afterwards. After something takes place, we're out there analyzing the information. Well, there's many layers of any deviation. Say, for instance, just whatever evidence we get our hands on, and most of the time, only thing we get is a story, an account, and that's it.
Right.
So we're really goofed up from the get-go. We're dealing on very little material. Now you could put that together into some sort of composite and then analyze it from there. But again, everything goes back to the human element, the belief patterns, and that just goof things up. The thing is, we just want the information. Keep it simple. Yeah.
I personally find a lot of times that after the fact, certain crafts that people have described, because there does seem to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes there's a trending of the type of object or type of the way the craft may look. And then often it could be as much as 15 years later you find out that this was experimental stuff that one government or another was working on. Isn't sometimes that the case too?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the CIA was talking about how they used the UFO phenomena as a cover for various programs, especially the stealth programs. But they were saying, they were happy when but it gave them some idea where they were seeing, to the degree of how well they were, let's say, hiding their visibility or radar or whatever. So the bottom line is, it is, but the bottom line is that the phenomenon has been around since the advent of humanity, since man was able to record this stuff, and there is no difference. In other words, the large orange orbs that I myself have experienced and seen, these things have been around and seen since man has been able to record events. Same thing with triangular craft. People think, well, triangular craft just showed up recently. No, they've been documented at least the 15th century and maybe even well beyond that. So the phenomena exists. The discs, which referred to as flying saucers in the 50s, same phenomena, variations of these things, and of course the far more nebulous types of plasma or translucent type craft. They have been seen throughout history. So they really are not something that it's just now that they're being seen. What has happened is the military-industrial complex has obviously been able to get their hands on enough information regarding these types of objects, if not actually their hands on the very objects themselves, re-engineered, back-engineered, or at least found out the components that make them so elusive and also very worthwhile as being crafts and for military purposes.
I actually find, when you mentioned, back to the 15th century, that those reports are more fascinating to me because they're more easily, you can more easily separate. Well, there were no such things then, flying around. So what people are seeing is sort of like, whoa, well, we know that that wasn't an experimental craft that they were seeing, type of thing. Um, Here is a really kind of maybe left field question, though, that just popped in my mind as I said that. Do you think that some of these reports from before we had the knowledge and ability to have anything flying in the sky, that some of the reports when people were saying they were seeing things flying, that they actually were seeing some sort of possible, actually seeing a craft, or could it have been like a time slip?
Well, one thing we do know is, or we know there's a correlation between gravity and time, and I know that time differentiation with some of these experiences do take place as far as encounters. I'm just right off the top of my head, on Saturday we'll be talking about the Val Johnson case where this unidentified aerial phenomena comes at this police officer's car, causes an impact. He's injured. There's probably one of the best physical trace cases within the last, say, 30 years, and there is a time differential, and it's actually recorded in his watch and on his car. Now, was it just a matter of it being affected, or was there something else? Now, people who experience genuine crop glyphs, or they refer to them as crop circles, and they walk into them, also experience and physically record differentiation in the time. So
Interesting.
yeah, I mean, so the end result is, I don't know how many cases I've had where time is missing on the observance of a UFO. Then the other interesting phenomena is that it does return. It's almost like elastic, that it's like an equation that has to eventually equal out at some point. So whatever is gone has to come back. And that's been in 3 cases. I'd like to have more cases like that and document the information. But again, this isn't something that isn't rock solid, but an interpretive one from personal experience. I'd like to have it actually recorded, where somebody has actually had time recorded, a differentiation, and then comes back, we've done this event. I've had this happen to me in one instance where I had an observation. I went somewheres and they said it was absolutely impossible. I couldn't have got there within that period of time. I did. So I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know if it's interpretive or if it's genuine, but it seems to be, it has happened more than, let's say, 4 times in research that I've personally done. So I think there may very well be something to that.
That same phenomena, as far as the time lapsing of one kind or another, that occurs it for various cases. Whether it be like what might be considered a ghost or haunting case. I have talked to people who have experienced that, and in which they went to go in, and the 2 guys, and they were working, and they do recall being a little disorientated, type of thing, but they finally had somebody come in after them, and they're like, hey, are you okay? And they're like, yeah, we're almost finished working. And they says, well, you've been in here for, it's been 5 hours. They're like, no, it's not. It's been 15 minutes. It was the most ridiculous as far as the time thing. They lost time. Now, it could have been due to them just being disorientated, that entire time, but still how they're functioning and working through it. And then ones that have nothing to do with hauntings, where people have recorded mileage on their car and time, and it just, nothing meshed. It just didn't mesh. Like you said, how did you get here? So I find that fascinating. Again, that's one of those common threads, I think, that are experienced in the different fields of the paranormal.
Sure. I mean, when you're going outside the scope of your own personal experience, I'll give you an example. The ones, all 4 of them so far, have been involving other individuals, their use of looking at time, in other words, instrumentation, so they're able to document something, either a phone call and their appearance, or lack thereof, and then their appearance, And then one individual stating that, oh my gosh, I was just looking at this thing for a couple minutes, jumped back in the car. I couldn't be 3 hours. Example,
Right.
guy goes out. He's going up towards up way up north by the Great Lakes at Lake Superior. He's up there, and all of a sudden he's by a farm, and he sees this large triangular craft. Gets out of his car. He's there. He says no more than a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes or so max, and he's watching this very large triangular object with some interesting characteristics, just sitting there hovering near a barn over a field. He's watching this thing. Gets in the car. He shows up at his friend's house, and his wife has been calling him for a couple of hours. He was gone for 2 hours more than he should have been.
See? Yeah.
Now, another person, this woman was driving in from Wyoming going to Dixon, Illinois. She's driving down on what was I-5 before it was 88, and she's driving with her children in the back seat, and all of a sudden sees this light ahead. She thinks it's a tower, but it's extremely bright, and she's worried. She thought, well, maybe it's on fire, something's wrong. She gets to the crest of the hill and looks over, and here, what she thought was in the distance was actually to her right in a field, and was an identified flying object sitting there. It's illuminated and very unusual. And so she gets out of the car, she's looking at it, and she's watching cars in back of her just speeding past. She's trying to flag them down. And she says, as if I wasn't there, they're not responding to me. She gets back in the car. The children are completely paranoid and non-responsive. She gets to the house. The father goes, where have you been? He goes, what do you mean? You've been gone. You should have been here an hour ago. She goes out to the car, and sure enough, there was a differentiation of an hour. Well, she gets back to Wyoming. She goes to work. She's ready to go to work. She kisses the husband. She gets in the car, and as she always did, she called the husband tell him that I made it to work and no problem. The reason being is she was far away to work, and she had to go through some mountain passes. So she calls him up and gives him the call saying, hey, everything's fine. I'm back. I'm here at work. And he goes and says, well, that's totally impossible. You just kissed me, and walked out the door.
Whoa.
So now this is the kind of phenomenon. And now myself, I was going to Michigan. I called him. I said, I'll be on my way. And I had an experience before. I seen something along with a few other individuals. So it was a multiple individual. It was a multiple witness sighting. And when I got there, they said that was totally impossible because I had just called them no more than a few minutes ago. Other people walked in the room who also heard my conversation that I was on my way coming out there, said that's totally impossible. So, I mean, these things do happen.
Yeah.
And what is it? I don't know. Is it interpretive? At that point, it would be universally interpretive and then affecting instrumentation. And that would be along the line of almost impossible.
Yeah, it's a really hard thing because time is such a perspective, to where we're at, measuring it from there to the other, and just universally. It's almost, it doesn't exist in a sense, time as we know it. So it really is a perspective, and it's such a difficult thing, especially like you said, when you're experiencing it. Is it just you don't know. You're trying to question yourself, and it's interesting because for the first time ever, last year I experienced that. Nothing instrument-wise to prove that there was this difference in time, other than, I was out, because the last year I was doing a lot of case study out at the Kettle Moraine with Jay Bachochin, and looking into Bigfoot phenomena, light anomalies, UFO, various activities all going on out there. And one of the nights that we were out, there was easily over an hour lost, where we recall looking at the time, and from, point A to where when we got back to the car, it was like, what? This is impossible. This can't be, time-wise. Don't know. We can't prove anything, but it was the first time ever where I would say that I think that I experienced that.
Yeah, and that area. First of all, Calmarin is known for a lot of phenomena. I've been out there before, and and it lends itself. See, that's the other thing. As part of the research I was doing in 2004, is there some sort of geological substrate that makes phenomena? Let's say it's more conducive to an area.
Yes.
And I always say, picture this. Picture you're holding a pen in your hand and you're writing you're writing your signature in the air. You can't see it, even though you're performing the task. Now you take a substrate, you put it up there, and all of a sudden you could see it. Now the only difference is the substrate. Is there some sort of substrate there, some sort of whatever, be it the geology, a lot of quartz or whatever, that makes it more susceptible for it to come together into a sensorially real, where you can or perceivable type of interpretation, where you could experience it in this human form, or where you could see it, and that is the issue. I know that is like water in the crop glyphs. It seems the research shows that the glyphs usually take place when there's enough water in these limestone tables to be tall, that there's enough water in there to allow the conductivity of whatever it is, microwaves or some sort of energy to create these plasmas, and then they do take place. So that, I think, is kind of interesting too. Now, does this work the same way? Probably, but all the details of which I would love to know, I don't.
You are a man after my heart, because I totally agree with you, because we were doing intensive research out there. And one of the things that I started to look at was the geological makeup of it. It is in fact a glacial, this particular one, a glacial area. However, it is extremely high. Most of Wisconsin is actually in silica sand, which is quartz, and combined with limestone, which are, and both of those are great conductors. And it strikes me that this particular area, combined with some of the swamp areas, waters, maybe underground water, some of it going that way too, with other type of extreme electromagnetic activity, manipulation that we may even be doing at this point, whether it be, a place like that in CERN, Hadron, or in Texas, which is, or Fermilab, and all the universities, all the experiments being done. What is this doing to our natural balance, our natural electromagnetic fields? What is this doing, and how this, combined with a particular geological makeup of an area, may make it conducive to witnessing different types of phenomena. Something's occurring.
I agree. The other thing is, what is the microwaves doing that are being tossed about? What is the particulates that are in the air, far more than usual, be it from pollution and additional to high altitude spraying of particulates to block out the sun or gamma radiation, or to propagate to have better radar conductivity for propagating radar, to make sure it does pick up more, gets better data. There's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of things going on and put in the air. And how does that affect us, the human, and our
brain?
Not just us, our brain, our perception, our reality.
Yes.
Now, does it? I personally feel, first of all, the introduction of all these microwaves has caused one thing for sure. I mean, I shouldn't say for sure, but what I see and have been monitoring and paying attention to, the fact that water molecules have a hard time coming together to create from humidity to precipitation to rain. So in other words, you need a higher amount of humidity to create precipitation, because the molecules are being agitated by microwaves. So what happens is, you'll have my hypothesis is that you'll have higher almost instantaneous episodes of rain and more condensed, so you'll have higher amounts of flooding and higher episodes of drought. In other words, it won't be the natural environment, but a manipulated environment. And now, if it works that way, how does it work on the cellular level of both human beings and even those animals that are more susceptible, say, for instance, amphibians, which are dying off left and right? We have less salamanders, toads, frogs. Are bees affected? Are animals with higher incidence or higher amounts of magnetite are in their brain, and birds, are they being affected? Are whales being affected by all this? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there are things going on. People say, oh no, there's enough studies in some of these cases to indicate that no, something is taking place. You can't have. You're always going to have. If there's going to be an action, there's going to be cause, and there's going to be effect. So we know there's actions, and it has to have an effect because there is some type of causality going on. What is it? What is the end result? How does it affect us?
Right.
And who knows? Now, in the world of what the paranormal is, and much of what is being perceived, how much of that is just through the mind, or it's just agitating certain locations in the brain and automatically creating, as if, a television set, if you put the right signals in, you're going to have an image on one side. Is that the same scenario? I don't know.
I know. Again, wow. We're going to have some fascinating conversations still yet to come, because I'm so right there with you on that. There was recently someone had come to me and they had experienced, because I have kind of a theory as to, a lot of times in the paranormal world we use as a go-to wormholes and things like that. And people had captured some things on photographs and whatnot. More than likely, most of the photographs, if possibly even all, are camera glitch anomaly type things, where you're getting a almost swirling vortex look in a photo. And I said, but I was looking at this and I'm going, this still could be some type of gravitational field distortion. Started to lead down this whole path. What was interesting, where I'm going with this, is I came across somebody this past weekend at the Ashmore Estates event that actually witnessed it, felt it, saw it. And in the sense that things were swirling and there were some lights, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Now, again, it could have just been some type of particular physical episode that this individual experienced. But what struck me about this was there have been, through NASA, they discovered this, and I know you know this because of stuff you just were talking about, in which the radiation that the astronauts are exposed to during certain points was causing them to see lights. Now, they did this even when eventually they blindfolded them and experimented with this, and discovered that the radiation was affecting parts of their brain, in that they were experiencing these green and white type of lights. So how much of, again, like just what you said, is it a radiation of some type, an electromagnetic field that is so strong or extreme it's affecting our perceptions? Or is it, in a sense, affecting some sort of universal balance, in a more real sense? You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Something that wouldn't be something more obvious. Let's say, for instance, let's take UFOs. A craft shows up, and you could see the craft. You're seeing it. Well, is it? No. There are those who'll say, no, it's just a manifestation in your head. It's an optical illusion. Really? Then the person says, no, it can't be, because now all of a sudden, let's say, for instance, it lands, and then we have physical trace evidence. Well, could there have just been a large amount of energy at that point from somewhere, that actually just manipulate or touches the brain in such a way that the human brain, when it's experiencing this certain type of explosion of energy, is it uniform? Maybe, I don't know. But then again, if you have it recorded on radar, if you have it recorded on film, then it's an entirely different scenario. Say, for instance, the 1952 sightings over Washington, D.C., mass sightings. So you don't just have one individual account. You have mass sightings, hundreds, if not thousands. You have radar data, not just one set of data on one date, but multiple dates, multiple locations, in the air, radar, and visual from ground and air. So you have everything necessary except for physical trace. That is just about as good as you could get to first of all, demonstrate that A, a phenomenon has taken place, B, it's manifesting itself in such a way that at least it's propagating a lot like something solid if it's not solid. So all the senses and the sensory instrumentation, radar, photograph, etc., is functioning and confirming everything.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty high. But it isn't, and like in science, there is no absolute. But then again, they always say you have to have the physical thing. No, you don't have to have the physical thing. You just need enough information to push it to the 51%. And guess what? Now your hypothesis is looking pretty darn solid.
Now, would a good example of this be the Tinley Park sightings? And if it is, or could you tell those listening about that particular incident when we come back from a commercial break? So everyone listening, please stay tuned. We will be right back.
Have you ever wanted to spruce up the marketing material for your business? Have you ever wanted to turn those memories you have on slides or VHS tapes into DVDs? Have you ever wanted to create the perfect personalized video for a loved one? Then look no further. The sky is the limit with Chumbucket Studios. Anything is possible because it all begins with a little imagination. Please visit www.chumbucketstudios.com for more information.
Into the Woods is a documentary that follows Mary Marshall and Jay Bachochan over the course of a year of intensive field research. Mary is the skeptical scientific researcher type, and Jay is the think-outside-of-the-box believer. Are all these different types of phenomena being experienced related to one another? Is this area beckoning paranormal activity? Is it a host to a portal of some kind? These two individuals combined their years of investigative research experience and set out to discover what is really happening. Different techniques, different approaches, one common goal: to find the truth. Into the Woods, a case study on the Wisconsin Sasquatch and other phenomenon. Available for purchase at intothewoodsdocumentary.weebly.com.
This is Robert Veets from V Paranormal. To keep up with what's new in the paranormal realm, I go to theparanormalmdradio.com and listen to new and past shows with host Mary Marshall. Mary's interviews are always engaging and enlightening.
Hello and welcome back. You are listening to the Paranormal MD radio show, and I'm your host, Mary Marshall. If you would like more information about tonight's guest, you can go to theparanormalmdradio.com. And if you'd like some information about me and some events I may be speaking at, and or to check out the classes and just a ton of information in regard to paranormal related topic matter, you can go to theparanormalmd.com. Before the break, we were speaking with Sam Maranto, who is the Illinois State Director for MUFON, and I was asking him about the Tinley Park, Illinois case incident. So, Sam, could you tell us about that, please?
Well, the Tinley Park sighting, we just celebrated August 21st, the first mass sighting. There were many sightings. There's still sightings. I had a call, and in fact, we were at a sky watch in Galena or 2 weekends ago, and I got a call that one of the witnesses prior says, "Nope, I think they're back, but they're more orange." And but these objects appeared on the 21st of August, 2004, the day of actually at the end of the Air and Water show, and they weren't just in Tinley Park. They were all over the place. They were in British Columbia, Canada, New York, Ohio, Houston the next morning, and then some 16 hours later, I believe is what it was, or no, a little bit longer than that, in Australia, and where it was recorded. And it was recorded in multiple locations. So we had video recording, we had photographs, we had hundreds, if not thousands, of witnesses. And we had witnesses not just here in Tinley Park and throughout the state of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, British Columbia, the Aegean Sea on the 20th, and Melbourne. But to this date, we still have the same configuration of this isosceles configuration of these illuminations. Now, for those people who are close enough to it, they would say, no, this is not just three independent lights in the sky. This is a large isosceles triangle. And when you watch the motion of the objects, and we've done this time and time and time again, I have hundreds and hundreds of hours analyzing and other people analyzing, independent evaluation. This seems to be the case. The only variation with the perspective is the perspective of the witness, the camera, but the geometric pattern seems to stay the same. Now, that clearly indicates that we're dealing with something, not an illusion, and boy, oh boy, you have enough evidence there to state, A, it's not an illusion. The event did take place. What does this? What can do this? What can move about the sky? And hyperleap in some instances where people see it in one spot and then see it in another spot in an instance. Is that within the scope of something that would be considered conventional technology? No. So I don't know what it is. It is, by all definition, an unidentified flying object. Is it extraterrestrial? I don't know. I didn't get the license plates. Could it be? Absolutely it could be. Could is a big word. Probably. Yeah, probably. I don't know. It could fall in that category too. The other thing is it anything that could have been made here on Earth by advanced technologies in the military-industrial complex? I am not privileged to that information either in this country or any other country. So all I could say is, who knows, but large isosceles triangular objects, again, have been documented since the 15th century. Along with them, other aerial phenomena, the large orange orbs, orange, yellow, and black, blue, bluish orbs. So these things have, coincide. Yeah. The bottom line is, who knows? But it doesn't mean it's something that's being taken place just now. Again, let's go back to, I didn't finish one statement. The time traveling concept. Are we seeing, I remember one gentleman who had experience in the Rendlesham Forest stating that these are us, from the future. First of all, if it was me from the future, I would be looking a little different. I'd have a lot more money. And I'd tell me now how cool it is to have one of these things and possibly deliver one to my driveway. So I don't think so. I don't think it is us per se, but it's a far probably more liberal interpretation of that term, if it's correct. Is it possible? Anything's possible. Anything is possible in an infinite universe, which is also infinite dimensionally. So I have no clue. I don't know what we are. So how the hell do I know what they are?
It does. It's like the more you get into all of this topic matter, it just is so true. The stranger it gets, the more questions you have. There is no definitive, yes, this is what it is. Um, it, because we just don't know. We know so little scientifically, and it is consistently changing to some degree at this point in our history because we're able to learn at such a faster rate than ever before. Um, it it just isn't interesting. Like where this is going to land up at, we're never going to find, I think, the answers in our lifetime. I don't know that we'll find them for, ever, to some degree, hundreds of years, thousand years. I don't know.
There's always the probability answers are changing. In other words, the term answered isn't even in the cards. In other words, picture a maze that is constantly changing. In fact, the movie The Maze, or whatever the heck it was recently, that was kind of neat because I'm sitting there watching. I'm like, wow, they may be preaching something, showing something that really is more in line to what's going on. It seems that our consciousness affects the outcomes of some things, as far as some research. So, can we be altering the scope of our relative reality? Because there is no absolute reality
Right.
that we're ever going to get our hands on, because that would encompass all time, space, and everything infinite. So that just isn't even the scope. But a relative reality, yeah, or a relative truth, yeah, maybe. Who knows? And I think you're onto it. And I think those of us who venture down this rabbit hole, I think most of us are coming to that point that a little more in play here than what we can actually ever get our mind around and forget getting our hands around.
Yeah, it does. Because then when you see experiments that they were doing, like they've been doing them actually everywhere, but in Israel there's the university there and elsewhere where they're doing things with coming to what seems at this point their conclusion that both the past and the future make the present. And they were doing it by the observation and measurement, and finding that when they got to the end of the time, measuring it at 1, 2, 3, that previous measurements changed. It seemed to indicate that once that last measurement, in the sense that was already still in the future, once that changed, it changed the present. So when you start putting all these factors in, and things like quantum entanglement and, like I said, multiple dimensions and universe, and your head could just spin on what the possibilities are of how this is occurring or what is exactly occurring. It gets insane. Well, you know what? I'm going to actually, because I'm sure people listening will want to hear some of the other particular stories, and you are so well versed in this. Do you mind if I ask some of these, throw some questions at you, like what is the Chicago O'Hare sightings in '06?
Okay, the Chicago O'Hare sighting that was at gate C-17. It was about 4:20 on November the 7th, 2006. So we're coming up to the 10-year anniversary. There was a fat dish-shaped object seen over gate C-17, the C concourse. And the people who are out there, they call them as ramp rats. They're loading up the plane that was actually heading out and going to be pushed back relatively shortly. And they went and they looked up, and they're seeing this disc sitting below the ceiling of clouds at about, maybe 1,500 feet, because about 1,900 feet to 1,500 feet was where the ceiling actually was. And it was a thick ceiling of clouds that was probably about 6,000 feet, as I recall, thick. And they watched this thing, and they were concerned because here's this obvious thing sitting over a restricted airspace. It's Class B airspace. They call the manager, tell him about it, because it is a safety issue. He in turn calls the tower after he gets down there and actually sees the darn thing. People are hearing the chatter across the the airwaves on the radios, and people are seeing it from various points, various vantage points throughout the airport and actually outside of the airport. Taxi cab drivers, people in the parking lots, etc., are seeing this, and many of them seeing without any indication from anybody else, nobody tipping them off, just somehow seeing this obviously unusual thing sitting below the clouds, and it sat there for about 20 some minutes. So what happens is one of my witnesses, who was a reporter, a retired reporter, a school teacher at the time, and who had grown up in the as a military brat. Her father was a commander, or captain, or commander. It was a captain of a air wing for the Navy, and she knew pretty much everything that flew. In fact, she was explaining everything to me in the proper terms and jargon, and she watched this along with a friend of hers was a doctor from Bulgaria. They were driving down LaGrange Road, Mannheim, towards the airport, and was able to see this almost, within a mile or so from the airport. They're seeing this unusual thing in the sky. They get there, they park in the international parking lot. There are already people out there staring at it, pointing it. And so she takes out her reading glasses, tilts them a little bit so she can see it better. She's also noticing people are taking pictures and videos of this. And she says while they're watching it, all of a sudden there's a slight tilt to it, a very slight tilt, and it shoots nearly straight up in and through the clouds, leaving a gaping hole, a blue gaping hole to the ceiling, to the blue sky above, instantaneously.
Wow.
So what had happened was Peter Davenport from the National UFO Reporting Center had received some calls from the individuals actually on site, and he then contacted John Hilkovich from the Chicago Tribune and asked him to take a peek at it. He had also, at that time, I was in the process of taking over the, I believe it was on a Thursday, or I think it was a Thursday, and I was on the phone with the state director at that time, Dave Marler. And he says, Sam, I'll talk to you this weekend, because I went down there to see him and pick up everything and do all the necessary stuff. And he says, I've got Peter Davenport on the phone. He wants to talk to me right away. Well, sure enough, he was calling him to tell him of the event, and that Richard Haynes, Dr. Haynes, from the National Aviation Reporting Center for Anomalous Phenomena, was going to be the point man and in charge of investigating this. But the event did take place, and if anything came in, that we were supposed to contact him. I had gotten a call from Dr. Rodiger from CUFO, Center for UFO Study. It was started by Jalen Hynek, and Dr. Rodiger gave me a call and said, Sam, what's going on with this sighting at O'Hare? And I go, what the heck are you talking about? I don't even know anything about it. So it was at that point that I went and started looking for more detail, because I didn't get any calls. And I came across an interesting bit of information on Mark Allen's site, Above Top Secret. So I called Mark up. Mark's one of the owners of it, and I called him up and I says, hey, what's the story here with this person? He goes, Sam, you should talk to this person. She actually seen it. So I says, well, contact the person, because it's, a violation of just giving out a person's phone number. So he had contacted her, and she called me, and that's how I met the witness, my first witness, and was able to interview her. I interviewed her twice, and my interview is part of the 128-page technical analysis of that sighting, which you can get at NARCAP.org, and I believe it's report number 10, technical report on the O'Hare sighting, and you'll find in there that there are many very good contributions, everything to analyzing how much energy would be needed to displace that much humidity in a near instance, as far as creating that gaping hole, and all this is well documented scientific work, and it's worth taking a read. It's a very good case.
Where is that available again? Narco?
NARCAP, NARCAP, NARCAP
Okay.
.org, and I believe it's report number 10, technical report number 10, O'Hare. And if you get a chance, just take a look at all of them. NARCAP does a phenomenal job analyzing. Basically, all they do is aviation-related sightings of aerial phenomena. That's their expertise. Dr. Haynes, I think the terminology is he's a optical psychologist, and he's worked with NASA and many other agencies. Right now, I think they're working with the Chilean military on studies of UAPs down there. The military down there is actually working publicly. In other words, they're public about doing the work versus up here everything's hush hush. And they have them on board as consultants.
It is just absolutely fascinating to me and amazing to me how well, by comparison to other fields, the UFO and I guess I'll just say it that way, the UFO community, how organized and well established and well documented things are. And I wish it was like that across the board for everyone else. If somebody witnesses something like what happened at the O'Hare, what are their options? Because I know, like the FAA and most of your formal organizations or institutions, government or not, they don't want to hear about it anymore. So where do people go to report something and to research maybe what they've witnessed?
Well, they go to MUFON.com and file a report. Many people go to Peter Davenport's site, and then he will field, in some instances, the report to other people because he doesn't do investigations. The thing is, if you go to MUFON.org or .com, you're going to fill out a report. It's going to go to the state director. Well, actually, we're actually setting up a new process, a triage process that we're in the process of doing. And if it comes here in Illinois, we do a triage. We evaluate to see if we could come up with a mundane explanation. We do the amount of work, preliminary work, just that we have to do before it even gets considered to go out to a field investigator is more than most people do ever on any tabulation of their cases. What we do is we take a look at the weather data is always put on there. We take a look at I look at heliospheric, we take at CMEs, any sort of earthquake activity, if that has anything to affect with it, anything in the news as far as celestial events, the known or unknown, if we had a meteorite shower or whatever. And if the object may appear to have been something that could have been accountable by a weather balloon, we do that too. We check that out. Aviation, knowing the signatures of both lights and patterns and silhouettes of objects, blah, 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 planes. And it goes on and on. Then we have experts in other different fields if we need it, if it becomes more elusive and unusual than that. So then we work it through. Then if we end up with unknown, that's about where it stays, and that's where it really gets interesting, because then it takes on the investigation that we may have something genuine. And now, if we have trace evidence, we collect the trace evidence, on and on and on. If we have photographs, we analyze the photographs. If we have footage, we analyze the footage. Radar data, if it's an event that within X amount of hours where it's near an airport, where we get radar data, we get the radar data. There's a lot of work. I mean, it's just not simply tell me your story and I'll make a decision. No, decisions, we don't come down to making any sort of case any sort of determination as far as what it could be or what it is. We're looking to first of all find out what it is, and that's what our goal is. What is it? If it's mundane or prosaic, we're going to probably find that out. If it's a hoax, we're going to know that too. And the bottom line is, if it's unknown, then we probably went through quite a few filters to say, well, at this point, I don't know what it is, but we know if it's recorded, we know that it is. And that's just about as best as you need to get at this stage. Then take it and gather that data and see what we got.
Okay, so now, Sam, don't yell at me because in general, as a paranormal investigator, I'm very stringent on the process I use and the trying to as much put in the scientific method as possible and controls and so on and so forth. Generally speaking, this would be the first time. I actually had, for the first time, I actually experienced what was definitely a UFO in July. Now, I did go searching, and this is where I said, don't yell at me, because I have not put in a report. I feel like the kid in trouble because I'm like, I should do, of all people, Mary, you should have done this. I do have all the information written down. I did write down date and distance, as much as I could gauge as far as distance and size and all that. So I still can do it, still put the report in. What was interesting to me is I did, though, go and check, and I have just checked again, actually, this morning, to see if there were any other reports, and I did not see anything. Does this happen, or how often does it happen in which because I'm in a very populated area, that you get a report from a person where it's just this one person reporting it, but technically a lot of other people should have seen it?
Now that's interesting. Okay, first of all, most of the reports are just individual reports, and they're accounts. Again, accounts are stories. Mm-hmm. Unless we have something to substantiate it, something that could be substantiated. First of all, you have to substantiate the event. You have to substantiate the person who was there at that time to see the event. So we need something outside of that individual. Let's say another witness, or a photograph, a security camera, or something like that, to substantiate it, to give it some life. Let's say some evidence is what we need. We need evidence to support the claim, and that's what we look for. How many times does it happen? That is the most common event. Now, the more common event that's coming in is the interpretive one, where I took this picture and I seen this strange image in there. And I think it's a UFO because it looks like a UFO. And that's usually a lens flare or refraction or something like that. But sometimes you got something really interesting. Now here we are stuck with the scenario. The person didn't see it. Now we have to find someone that could say, yeah, it's something outside the scope of an artifact inside the camera. And that makes things, there's always something missing in the equation.
Yeah.
Now, in your situation, here you are, you're in the city or in a populated area. You see something at what time was it?
It was around 12:31. I have it written down. I don't recall now, but somewhere around there.
12:30, 1 o'clock.
1 a.m.
1 a.m. Not too many people out. So that knocks down, the possibility. And how would you describe it?
Well, that's where it gets a little interesting, is that it's nothing atypical. It was, if I had to describe it, it would be initially what caught my attention was an extremely bright, like almost LED blue. And at first I could see it through the trees. I would happen to be out on the second floor balcony. I'm a smoker, so I was having a cigarette. And so I had no camera either. And everybody's like, well, why didn't you go run? I go, by the time I would have ran and found my phone or something, that it would have been gone. But so I watched the direction of this and how it was coming, and it's first heading east, and then it jotted, and there's no sound. It jotted from east to south, and then came around so quickly. The speed and size of this thing was huge, huge. And I'm almost looking at what appeared to be this blue LED dome. I'm guessing at this point that it was bullet shaped because I could not see the back end of it, per se. And then watched it move. And now this is where it actually got interesting, besides the fact of no sound in the direction of it, is I now see it almost to the side, and it, as it's moving, it disappeared and then appeared, disappeared and then appeared. You know, this lighting in different place already. The speed had to be incredible. This is again now where it gets even stranger, is by the time now I'm watching it more in the distance, it had now turned and was following more of a path heading north. It seemed that I could no longer see this LED, but I'm seeing what looked like, now this is where it gets a little more typical. It had a tail of sorts. It almost could be drone-ish at this point. But I saw a second set of lights, and I recall thinking, I wonder what this has got to be a plane. What are these people seeing? You know, they're going to be seeing this. Well, the set of lights stopped, and this object stopped, which would almost be side by side. You know, as far as your depth perception could take. And the second set of lights that I thought was a plane just disappeared. And now this object continued on its way in a different direction. I no longer saw the LED. It again did the appear, disappear in the sky type thing, meaning the speed, you know, in distance you see it, and then X amount of, mile, distance you would see it again, and that was the end of it. So it was a whole combination of really bizarre circumstances that I have not heard before, in that it almost seemed to, what I could see and what I then saw later, the two objects didn't seem to quite match. But I also might have been just more blinded initially by that blue LED light where I couldn't see the back end of it. So yeah, that's what I saw. Very strange.
Well, the thing here is based solely on the veracity of your statement, okay, and your ability to perceive. If all these things are correct from your perspective, what on earth has those characteristics that you know of?
You know, I have to be honest. At first I was like, this is UFO, this is UFO. Then the second thing, when I got to the end, the second part, where I said it looked kind of drone-ish, then I started going, this has got to be just some sort of experimental thing. And the second set of lights, if I had to guess, and it is purely a guess, because they're there and I thought it was a plane, then they just disappeared, is almost if it docked onto the larger one. And
now see, that's what you're talking about here as far as the coloration, the motion, and you're saying it's huge. Now that perception is, when you're saying huge, you don't even know how close it is. So therefore, because there's no way to judge just by looking directly at it. And if it's looking big just from just looking at it, and it may be further away than it actually is, then it may be really big. Right. Now, it could be either very close, and it's not as big as you think. Therefore, it appears to be big. But you're saying it was you were looking behind trees. You've seen it behind trees.
Initially. But then it came around, and that's where it got very large to me. And that's where the blue LED, almost like at the front of a bullet or rocket type thing, dome. And there was a little bit of, and I don't know if that was an illusion, where it seemed like it was a little bit of it, almost this light, because it was moving so fast, was shooting off of it. Not like in a the bottom of a rocket. I think it's just because of the speed it was moving. It was
So you're saying it was faster than pretty much. Well, give me an
yeah,
idea of the speed. Faster than anything you've seen?
than
As
anything I've seen. And there's zero sound, no sound.
wow. And as far as the color, the blue, how would you? What was the closest blue?
I would have to describe it as an LED. Like if you were to take a blue LED light,
Hmm?
flashlight, or anything that we've used in displays and stuff, that would be the closest I would describe it as. And so what I initially saw to what I saw as it moved away further in the distance was almost appearing like two different things. Now obviously it's not. I think it's just because that I was more blinded, if you will, by that blue LED that I couldn't make out the back end until it moved away into the distance. And now I'm seeing the back end of it, which seemed to have more of a the top being almost, and here's a good description, almost as if you were to look at a helicopter from above, but I was seeing it on an angle now. So you're seeing that little bit of a round and a tail. Just it's not adding up. So
Yeah.
now, so initially it was like, this is the UFO. And then I was like, oh, it's some type of drone. But then and even the docking, that could have been the same thing. Just didn't all make sense.
Well, the thing is, you've seen it at you remember the time, place, where,
Yeah.
direction. And you remember the direction. Now, when you're looking at it, you're higher than the ground level. You're looking at trees. So you're looking down through the trees, or would you say it's how
Still
high?
up. It was still
Still
up. Yeah,
okay.
I would say that the initial sightings were probably, I am going to guess, what would be 500 feet to up,
Hmm.
500 plus feet up.
Yeah, because you don't know how far away it is. The further
Right.
away it is, if it's keeping the same altitude, it's going to appear lower on the horizon. As it gets closer to you, it's going to go up. That's how our perspective works. The same thing as if it's to your right, it's going to appear further to. It's going to go to center. The further away it is, or to the left, it's going to go to center. Above, it's going to go down. Down's going to come up. I mean, that's just basically how the eyeball works as far
Right.
as.
And women in general, too, have there's physically a reason we have not as good depth perception
Now that's something I
as
didn't
men.
know.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Women, that's why there's always, it started years ago when I had found that out, because of the joking of how women parallel park, kind of thing. This was years and years ago. And there actually there's a real reason for that, is our depth, our visually, our depth perception is not as good as men.
I'll be
So
doggone. Well,
that's something I took into consideration too as I'm trying to judge that. It's a little difficult because you can only use your perceptions.
how long did you have? What would you say from the point you seen it to the last, so it disappeared? How long was that observation? Would you say?
Probably 2 minutes.
That's pretty darn good.
Yeah,
That's
it
pretty
was
good.
pretty, that's what I mean. It was such an experience that, it was just very interesting, that's why I'm like, someone else had to have observed this, and I'm not seeing other reports. Now, it could have just been the time, because a lot of people are not, are sleeping or not look outside at that point in time. But with that being said, it's still northwest suburb, populated enough that you would think that someone else would have seen this. And it's possible that they did, and they're just not reporting it, just like me. So people, don't do what I did, report it,
Yeah.
which I will still submit a report.
And we could cross-reference. Once it comes in, I could do all sorts of cross-referencing, and my investigators, you'll meet, I think you know a few of them anyways,
Yeah.
but they're very good. And we do is cross-reference other databases and see if there's anything else there.
You know what I'll do?
And that happens.
I will bring the specific information that I wrote down with me, because there are, and this is a good way for us to kind of get into talking about this. There is a meeting coming up at Starved Rock, correct?
Yep, this Saturday, and it'll be at at the Star of Rock Lodge, which is in Utica, Illinois, and people can find out the details by going to mymufon.com, and I think you have a link on your page.
I do.
And check out, just hit the there's a little tab there to click to the site, get the actual map, the schedule, and Mary, you're on the schedule there. And in fact, you could probably be up there twice, because you could actually, when you have the open mic, you could go up there and tell your account, and maybe you could have a drawing by then of some of the details of what you saw.
Yeah, you know what? I will do that. I'll try to put something together so that to visually, for a visual of what I saw. Are there other, I don't know, symposiums or meetings or conferences that people can attend too?
Oh, there are so many that do take place. We just had of course, the MUFON Symposium down in Florida, which was a couple of weeks ago, and then the one in Arizona, which is the the International UFO Congress. I was speaking last year. I was the first speaker. That'll be in February, so do take a peek at that. I'm going to start posting all the major events up, and of course we have events, a couple times a year in Tinley Park, monthly usually in Rockford. One of our state section directors holds one up there, which is always nice to attend. And then twice a year we have our event in the Star of Rock area. We're going to be going to different locations, and people would like to come with us and venture to different state locations that are really neat. These resorts like Pierre Marquette. We're going to have an event up in the Zion area at the Illinois Beach Resort up there. We hope to have.
Really?
Oh,
I
yeah,
love that. I've been there. Yeah, that's a great place.
That's a cool place, and I haven't been up there in ages, and they just got done remodeling it. The other thing is, I would like to have an event in Lake Geneva, which is a beautiful area over the border into Wisconsin, and then see if we could set up a chance to go to the Yerkes Observatory, which of course was the location that J. Allen Hynek got his degree from and done his research at as an astronomer. So a lot of big names. Oh yeah, a lot of big names came from that facility, and it's just a very interesting, old, beautiful telescope. In fact, it's still the largest refractor telescope, I think, in the world. I think it still is, and it's just one heck of a neat place.
I would love to talk a little bit about J. Allen Hynek. For the audience, it's interesting because long before I knew I'd be doing what I do, I had the opportunity to briefly talk with him when I was a child. He actually was the one of two only living relatives a girlfriend of mine had, and she lived with her grandmother, who was raising her, and and J. Allen Hynek, her last name's Hynek, was her cousin, was the grandmother's cousin. And so when I was a child, now I wish I could re-grab that time, and I have so many questions. And we were just in that, what is all this UFO stuff, the kind of thing. And she's like, well, he does this. Well, let's give him a call. Interestingly enough, it was probably during the period just when he initially was, because he initially started out to disprove this all, it was during when he became the believer, if you will. And his only answer to it, because he had to be really careful, I think, at that period of time, was, all I can tell you is, yes, it is real, it is true. And that's all I really remember from being a child. So I think that people listening would be fascinated to understand his story of how he started and where he landed up in this field.
Well, the funny thing about I had to laugh because here you had the opportunity almost at a whim to be able to call him through your friend, because
Right.
he's a family member. Not too many people had that option
I
or
know.
opportunity. How cool is
I
that?
know it
Yeah.
is, but I was a kid. I didn't know. I wish I could go back in time and, like I said, re-grab it now, knowing what I know now, and drill them with questions.
Yeah, that is just so cool. Well, Jalen Hynek started out, of course, where it came into the ufology aspect, would be working for Project Blue Book as a consultant. Now, Jalen Hynek had a long history of working with the Department of the Navy and also worked on some very important components that help us win the Second World War, win the Second World War. So if you go online, look up actually go to Wikipedia and look up Jalen Hynek, and you can find out more detail and some detail on as far as early period, but starting as far as from the involvement with the UFO issue. He worked for Project Blue Book, was one of a series of official, these were the official and acknowledged studies by the Air Force. We had Sign and Grudge were the two prior ones that were acknowledged as being official studies. And he was in there basically to analyze and find an explanation. And even if it didn't look like there was an explanation, such as the swamp gas scenario in 1966 in Dexter, Michigan, Ann Arbor, etc., that area. He came up with some crazy hypotheses that that it was caused by swamp gas, and the people in the area were really upset about that. And Gerald Ford, who was a congressman at that point, was really getting upset because he was getting calls from his constituents. They were complaining about such nonsense. These people are police officers and citizens, respected citizens of the community, and try to push that off on them that they're just saying swamp gas. So after that, Jalen Hynek had to basically look at things a little bit differently. In fact, he said, that would be the last time I will pull a chestnut out of the fire for the Air Force. And because it was clearly noted by him, and here's a man of science, that there's something going on here. This isn't just illusions. The illusions don't show up on radar. Illusions don't leave physical traces on the ground or affect different things. And so his research took a different angle. And in 1969, of course, Project Blue Book became no more. It was dissolved, and the Air Force had officially nothing to do with the UFO phenomena, thanks to the work of Edward Condon and his committee at the University of Colorado. And you could read the book on that, which was a committee convened by Congress to investigate at a university level. And Edward Condon, who was a physicist, a renowned physicist, a great physicist, and also who was the director prior to that to what would eventually be NIST today, but which was called the National Bureau of Standards. He had an interesting history, and as far as all of this, and he was at the right place at the right time to be put in charge of this project, because it was their job to make sure that they found nothing worthy of making sure any further studies should be done. In other words, it was their determination to bury this. And the bottom line, and people say, well, there's no UFOs. No, the bottom line was that this does not represent a threat to national security. Therefore, let's stop it. Unless it's a threat to national security, we have no interest in investigating it any further. So the notion that many so-called skeptics run around saying that, well, Condon said there was nothing to it, it's all a bunch of bunk. No. No. The bottom line was that they felt it wasn't a threat to national security. And that was repeated time and time and time and time again. Not that the phenomena doesn't exist, not that these things are genuine, that it's just not a threat to national security. Well, that in itself is a matter of discrepancy.
You know, I find it so interesting because you one thing you mentioned was and he was congressman at the time, but President Ford, he experienced and witnessed a UFO, and he always had a great interest in the documenting and finding of it. Did he not?
I think all the presidents had some foreknowledge on all this. A few of them had experiences. Reagan had two. Of course, the one that gets the most amount of publicity, of course, is the Carter episode. In fact, you could actually go on YouTube and hear his reaction to that when he's asked it. Ford, but there's a whole slew of information that's out there by a gentleman out of Canada who's an investigator. And he wrote a book on the presidents and UFOs. Oh. And it's interesting to see what they knew at what time. I find it interesting, and I'll just throw this in just for a little diversion, but interest. You may have heard about the Aurora crash, which was April, I believe, the 17th of 1897 in Aurora, Texas. Jim Mars, who was an investigative researcher, who's named to claim anything investigative in the world of journalism would be, of course, the JFK assassination. He got interested into the subject of UFOs after that, and sitting around talking with a bunch of other journalists saying, now, what is the next thing to investigate that the public has an interest in? And everybody, the other people looked at each other and they said, UFOs. And he was like, you got to be kidding. So that's how he got interested into looking into UFOs. And here he's a Texan, and Mars is his actual name. It's not some made-up name. And here he had heard about this crash in Aurora, Texas, and he did the investigation on it. So I knew he wrote the book, and the book was coming out, and I hadn't talked to him in a while, but I gave him a call, and I says, hey, Jim, how everything's coming with the book? I got things done. It looks great. It should be out, blah, blah, blah. I go, well, when you were doing it, what was the biggest discovery? He says, Sam, you know what the biggest discovery was? The thing that really got me? He says, right after this event took place, within a very short period of time, maybe an hour or two, now mind you, this is 1897, people showed up from outside the community that were orchestrating the manner in which this was going to be handled. They were carting the debris off. They were telling people to go back home, nothing happened, there's nothing of interest, blah, blah, blah. Yes. So I go and I says, so you're telling me in April of 1897 there was already a protocol in place to handle this? He goes, yes.
Wow.
So that is pretty telling. So apparently, and from what we've learned, this wasn't even the first time. We always think Roswell was the first time. No. Well, when was the first time? Maybe in this neck of the woods as far as United States. It may go back a heck of a lot further than we could ever imagine.
Right. And just simply because it was easier back then to sweep it under the carpet, to cover up, to not, have it be public, because unlike it is now, I think it's much more difficult.
Sure. Well, I give a presentation on the real aliens and cowboys. I do a presentation on that every once in a while, and I go back to, I think, 1861 on that presentation. Now, we were talking about these earlier episodes. There's a book called Wonders in the Sky by Jacques Vallée, who was the counterpart of Gale and Hynek in the establishment and functionings of CUFOS. Also, during much of his research as a consultant with with Blue Book. And his partner on this book was Chris Aubeck, who lives in Spain. And it's a very good book, very detailed, very scrutinized and filtered. These accounts go back many years, and we're talking hundreds AD, not just the 1800s or 1500s, well beyond that. Well documented cases of unusual aerial phenomena. And if you get a chance, get the book. And I recommend people reading it. It's well documented. And you could see, first of all, that throughout history, we've had unidentified aerial phenomena influencing history, influencing the outcome of very historical events. Everything from Constantine to major battles to, tons of stuff.
Right.
Just take a peek at that and say, oh my gosh, if anything, UFOs or unidentified aerial phenomena should be incorporated into our history, even if it were only from a mythological point or just a perspective of our humanity. I mean, this is something that needs to be incorporated, and it isn't.
Well, before we continue on, we need to take another quick break. Everyone, please stay tuned, grab a drink, and smile. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Robin Terry from Ashmore Estates. Ashmore Estates is located about a mile west of Ashmore, Illinois. It was a former almshouse or poor farm, and then later a psychiatric care facility. If you're not familiar with Ashmore Estates, you might have seen us on Ghost Adventures, Season 5, Episode 1, or the documentary called Chill in the Grave 2 by the Booth Brothers. There have been major improvements to the property since May of 2014. We have electrical, windows, restrooms, a separate team room, and even bunkhouses for overnight guests. I think you'll find the building an interesting place to perform an investigation, either at night or in the day. We also offer photo shoots, historical tours, and a location for movies to be filmed. Check us out on our Facebook page, Ashmore Estates, or on our website at
Bowles, Mary Marshall, and Jay Bachochin over the course of a year of intensive field research. Mary is the skeptical scientific researcher type, and Jay is the think-outside-of-the-box believer. Are all these different types of phenomena being experienced related to one another? Is this area beckoning paranormal activity? Is it a host to a portal of some kind? These two individuals combined their years of investigative research experience and set out to discover what is really happening. Different techniques, different approaches, one common goal: to find the truth. Into the Woods, a case study on the Wisconsin Sasquatch and other phenomenon. Available for purchase at intothewoodsdocumentary.weebly.com.
Have you ever wanted to spruce up the marketing material for your business? Have you ever wanted to turn those memories you have on slides or VHS tapes into DVDs? Have you ever wanted to create the perfect personalized video for a loved one? Then look no further. The sky is the limit with Chumbucket Studios. Anything is possible because it all begins with a little imagination. Please visit www.chumbucketstudios.com for more information.
Hi, this is Sam Maranto, investigative researcher, and you're listening to the Paranormal MD radio show. If you're really looking for an out-of-this-world encounter, make sure to listen.
Hello and welcome back to the Paranormal MD radio show. I am your host, Mary Marshall. Before the break, we were speaking with Sam Maranto, who is the Illinois State Director for MUFON International. Sam, I wanted to ask you, why is there such a disregard and cover-up? And I know part of it, you said if it's not a threat, if we don't consider it a threat of some kind, the government just is like, okay, just scoot it off to the side. You have everybody from people like Stanton Friedman testifying before a congressional hearing and so on this type of phenomenon. Why do you think the government doesn't address it? Not in a real sense.
Well, the strange thing about it is they also went before the United Nations back in the 70s, which is a very interesting story. Jacques Vallée and Lee Spiegel from the Huffington Post. Lee Spiegel was the one who was actually able to get that to actually happen. You have to have a sponsor nation, and Grenada at the time was a sponsor nation, because that's a very interesting story altogether. You should have Lee Spiegel on one of these days. He is just an interesting guy. The thing is, the reason for this, we could think, we could ponder, we could speculate. But it seems as though the information seems to point to that this phenomena is far more entrenched than where we want to allow it to be. And where we want to allow it to be is only in science fiction, myth and mythology, and into some sort of unusual realm of just something we could sit around, talk around a fire about, and not take it seriously. And the other thing is, the phenomena may be closer to us than we want it to be, and we may be more involved in it, or how could I say, intimately involved in it, because we don't know who we are, what we are, and why we are. And I would say, if we had those answers, much like the meshing of a wheel or a gear, all this would fall in place. But we don't have that information. So I think, in short, it has to do with us, not so much with them. The other thing is, the technology that we have seen in the last, say, 30 years, 70 years, is off the charts. I would say, just look at a cell phone. If that isn't magic, what is? Maybe there is this influence that is slowly allowing this humankind, this new humankind, to slowly adapt technologically, but I think it has to catch up both emotionally, consciously, and definitely along the lines of interactions with not just our own species, but just imagine, how could we ever interact with anything other than us? We have a hard time dealing with people that don't look like us, sound like us, whether color, race, or creed. I mean, my God, it's just, how can we incorporate ourselves into a much larger reality as far as dealing with other types of beings? How?
So, really, kind of in a nutshell, is that the government is piecemealing out and allowing certain information, letting what's out there, but in a sense piecemealing it to slowly bring the general public into what they know to be a whole lot more in the probability of other alien life of some other form at root of this.
Well, I don't even think the government per se has all that much authority over what takes place. That's my feeling. Again, that's my feeling.
Yeah.
What I think and what I extrapolate from this is the government, as we know it, doesn't exist from 4 years to 4 years with some person in charge being whoever. That isn't the government. The underlying permanent government doesn't change per se. That power structure or management is in place. Those things that change basically dictate the manner in which the political footballs get resolved, what type of wrapping paper the next issue is, and usually these are superficial, a much greater reality. I mean, just stop and think of the real problems facing we have extinction levels coming that for species that are being wiped out left and right. We have potentially extraplanetary objects that could take us out at any point in time. We have major changes on the Earth. We have biological changes in us. We have pandemics. We have this and all these different things that are real issues, and we're contemplating and concentrating on multiple gender changes or whatever with toilets and stuff. So the thing is, they just get to make decisions at the most subliminal, not subliminal, but very superficial. Yeah, superficial level. That the very deep, the sublime, the real issues, those undertones. I mean, these real serious things. I don't think presidents will ever come close to having a voice in that. They don't. They're a temporary accommodation to be a figurehead, to be a voice, to be a mouthpiece. That's about it.
Yeah.
And yes, they do make decisions on what things appear to be very large, but that's about it. But it's only the footballs they're allowed to play with. Those games they're allowed to be involved in. I don't think the government per se is really involved in this. I think there are certain components, and from what we know, in 1947 with the creation of the national security state, this matter was taken out of congressional oversight. It was gone. It was put into the hands of basically contractors and, if you want to call it a secret government or whatever you want to call it. I have no idea what the term would be. But it's not in the the normal structure, no longer.
If, as far as with the governments and UFOs and putting even the government to the side, how closely related is the UFO and alien field? Because now you can go into the areas when you start talking about aliens that are having other interactions with abductions and so on and so forth. Is that something too that people, because we talk a lot more about unidentified objects if somebody is experiencing that, is that something also that MUFON handles, or should they go to another agency?
MUFON has a subgroup that would look into that. If first of all they have to go through these specific filters to see if in fact, I get a call monthly, sometimes weekly, from mental institutions, where people are calling me from mental institutions.
Really? Oh my God.
Oh yeah, the calls I get. And I'm not saying that people who have mental issues cannot also be experiencing some of this phenomena, as far as you want to call it, encounters or abductions or whatever. I have no idea. I know that, let's take the Travis Walton case, where you have multiple witnesses, you have physical trace evidence, you have these individuals being subjected to, lie detector tests and passing on multiple occasions. If you take all the evidence on that case, in addition to some others that we rarely even hear about, no, the phenomena does take place. These things do happen. And do we investigate them at the level that I handle, that I put my investigators out to do? No. Have I worked on some? Yes. Do I feel there's something to it? Absolutely. Do I know all the details? I won't even start to even say I have anything close to anything resembling expertise on that. MUFON has a group, Kathleen Martin, who is the niece of Betty Hill, and Betty and Barney Hill, of course, being the famous interracial marriage couple that was, apparently abducted, encountered some UFO encounter, abduction, whatever you want to call it, thereafter. And that was probably the one that received the most amount of publicity, but it isn't the only one. And then Travis Walton being the one that most people may know with the movie Fire in the Sky. And of course, Travis is supposed to be out here at our at the Ghost Conference. So I hope to hear from Ursula to see if that is going to take place.
Oh, is he really?
Yeah.
That would be awesome. Yeah, I noticed this year there's a little more expansion of the Chicago one, because the focus has always been very, very, very much ghosts. And I think like the Milwaukee con, which is really it's newer and it's been more encompassing, because the Milwaukee one will have ghosts, UFO, cryptozoologists, just all different. I noticed that the Chicago one this year seems to be expanding a little more, which is nice.
That's a good idea. I was there. Well, I was there next to you. In fact, I had a booth and I was able to give a talk. That was how many years ago? 3 years ago? 4 years ago? Whatever it was.
Yeah, about 3, I think.
Yeah, but I'm going to be there, and whatever questions, while I'm there, or if anybody from the organization's there, we'll address them. The thing is, it's nice to see more of that. And as getting back to the topic, as far as are these two being considered into MUFON? Yes, but again, there is such this serious undertow of people wanting to sue you for whatever, and being accused of this, that, or the other, that when you're venturing into the realm of having to do some sort of regressionary hypnotic analyses or psychoanalyses, or looking at physical trace evidence in the human body, say implants or marks or whatever, anything to do with that, you're getting into an area that you got to have the experts, and you need the oversight and issues to make sure that nothing goes haywire, because there has been problems with that, and people are just looking for one reason or another just to come down on you and make your life miserable. Yeah, believe me.
Well, we need to wrap this up. I absolutely, as you know, absolutely love speaking with you, because I do have a great respect. You have so much knowledge. I admire your recollection on things. Oh my goodness. For you, when you come up with a story, the dates, like at 1:33, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how does he remember all this? But I just have so much respect for what you do, and I I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. You are on my show a few years back. Unfortunately, the audio was damaged, and so I was never been able to replay that show. So thank you for agreeing to come back on and doing the show now.
It was a great time, and it's always a pleasure talking to you. I'm looking forward to seeing you this weekend, and the both of us are going to delve through some of the information again, but probably a little more in detail. So make sure if you have the opportunity, folks, come on out and see us. It's going to be a great time, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh, and thank you. And you know what? Real quick, can you throw out the website one more time?
It's www.mymufon.com, mymufon.com.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And remember, if you would like to get more information on tonight's guest, you can go to theparanormalmdradio.com.